What's going on, guys? Welcome to PAX Online 2021. This international panel is titled Working from Home as an Indie Dev Without Losing Your Mind. I'm your host, Jono Pech. I'll be moderating the discussion today. I'm the host of 8-Bit's Putting in Work interview podcast, as well as Comedy Rewind. I've also worked in games as a writer and sound designer, but joining me today with far more experience and expertise in the games industry, we have Paulina Samy, from Dragon Bear Claw Studios, creative director in Melbourne. How you doing,
Dragon
Paulina?
Bear Studios.
Sorry, what did I say?
Dragon Bear Claw Studios. Although I think a claw would be a cool addition.
Dragon Bear Claw, I don't know where that came from, but it made its way into my Google Doc somehow. I'll try and get this one right. Jared Trail Rainbite. Is that how you pronounce it, Jared?
I feel like you should know this one by now, yeah.
Yes. Jared is the lead programmer there, also experienced programmer with Pickpock over in Wellington. Jessica Moore also joining us from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Drop Bear Bites producer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Very good. So with the introductions done, we'll go maybe a bit deeper into explaining each person's role within your team, a little bit about how the studios are set up, the staff numbers and the way that you're currently working, because we are talking about what it's like to work remotely. But I think the context of if that's always the way it's been done, or if you've had to adjust recently with everything going on in the world, I think that's some good information for people to have. So we might start with you, Paulina, in Melbourne.
So yeah, I'm the managing and creative director at Dragon Bear Studios, and we're making Enchanted, which is like a cooperative game on PC and consoles. And so we've been in production for almost 4 years now, I guess. And we actually just moved into our office, like a fancy new office at the start of 2020. And as you can imagine, that didn't last very long. So it has been, a period of adjustment and flexibility, I guess.
And you've got people set across like different locations as well, like all over the world?
At this point, we just have people based in Australia. Half the team's in Victoria, the other half's in Brisbane.
Okay. Yeah.
Or at least it seems like it. So all the same time zone, but I guess different temperatures, different restrictions, different lockdowns.
Sure. I thought you mentioned France before the panel started, but that must be something else.
Oh, our publisher Asmodee is in France.
Okay.
So we have a lot of meetings in the evening to chat with them. Yeah.
Cool. And Jess, you have got people all over the world, right?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the opposite situation. I'm here in Amsterdam, but most of the studios down in Australia, with also some people in South Africa and North America, and our publishers in the UK. So many early mornings for me in particular.
And Jared, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, for Rainbite stuff, we were all in New Zealand, which is, easy enough for a time zone, but then publisher in Hong Kong, which is, it's not too bad. It's just kind of like later in the day is when you end up having contact. But yeah, in terms of being global or anything like that, but in terms of working at home, it was everyone working at their own individual homes, which is, how it is. We've never had an office, and we never will, essentially.
Yeah. And you had a period of time where one of the three of you was in Japan, right? And I guess that has been part of your experience.
Yeah. So Daniel was in Japan for a year, but he would essentially just wake up early to be in our time zone, because Japan's only like 3 hours different or something. So he would just get up earlier, which was easy for us, It's fine.
That's really dedicated.
Yeah.
To like someone to change their whole lifestyle, like to join the team.
He gets to finish work early, I guess, essentially. He gets to finish like 3 or something, or 2.
Yeah.
It's a day walker, I guess. Yeah.
You haven't considered doing that, Jess, adjusting to Australia time?
I live with a partner who's also a game developer, and he's in this time zone here in Europe. So we have to sort of like coordinate. I'm sure lots of other people have to do that too, so that we're not keeping each other up late or waking each other up too early.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll start with maybe a positive about working remotely. We had a question on Twitter from @NicoSaysThings, who says, how much of your game was made by someone not wearing pants? And I don't need to know about your specific pants routines or situations, but maybe we could just talk about the benefits of working from home compared to, a formal professional office setting. I'm guessing that there's a bit more of a lifestyle aspect to it that does have some positives. Jared, I know you've recently started working in the office with Pickpock, so that's a bit of a contrast for you to compare to.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wore onesies, or my uniform was sweatpants. It's pretty classic. Just like I didn't wear real pants for weeks at a time, which is, it's always good.
Sorry, what are real pants?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Who needs them?
They don't exist in Melbourne anymore. You can't
Feel-
find them.
We don't have them anymore, yeah.
But yeah, it's very different, I guess, in terms of like being around people. I guess like you're obviously very relaxed at home. You can kind of, I would take naps at lunch. I would just like sleep on the couch or on my bed or whatever if I need to. But can't do that when you're at work. A bit more professional there.
Sure, you won't get away with it at work.
Not in office though.
Yeah. How about you, Paulina? Like you've had, I guess, a small time where you did have an office, right? And you've had a taste of that. But was there anything about going back to working from home that you were happy about?
I would say that the one thing is, I guess, because I have late meetings, I would probably get home at 7, or I'd be finished at 7, opposed to getting home at 8. So
Sure.
because
Less commute,
I guess less commute is the only thing I can really think of. I guess also going for a walk in the park at lunch.
Yeah, I mean, for me, working from home, it's like I can cook my own dinner instead of eating leftovers every day or going and buying something. So there's the little things you have to hold on to.
That's
sometimes.
a good point.
Yeah.
Your diet must be much better, right, than eating city food.
That's it. What about you, Jess?
Yeah, I love being able to slowly chip away at a meal throughout the day. Just get up and put something on the stove, take 5 minutes to poke at it. I really enjoy being home in general. Again, for the walks in the park, cuddles with Kitty, naps. I think naps should be involved in every professional environment. I really hope we can bring that from lockdown into our lives, because there are so many problems that a 15-minute lie down can fix, right? Especially in the mid-afternoon when you still have work to do, but you're trying to get through this log. It's a bit of a break.
Yeah, just unpack all the problems of the world. I don't know. I wake up from a nap and feel more tired somehow, but maybe that's just me. Yeah.
I actually really. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I was gonna say another benefit of being at home in terms of getting on top of chores. I feel like you can do a bit more, put washing on or whatever when you're at home. That's another benefit. Because you definitely miss that when it all stacks up to the weekend, and then that's what it has to be now for me.
What were you gonna say, Paulina?
I was just gonna say that I support Jess's thoughts about naps. Our studios really come on board with nap culture. Just from a mental health perspective too. If you're tired, why would you be working? It would just be a really ineffective use of your time. You might as well just go have a nap and you'll feel better.
Yeah, I think it was Da Vinci or one of those crazy inventors that napped 8 times a day. Or maybe I just learnt that from a Seinfeld episode. I can't claim to know for a fact. Yeah. But I mean, for people who have come from offices originally and then adjusted to remote working, what was that experience like for you? What did you find most challenging about that kind of transition? Does that apply to anyone?
Not me.
Yeah, you've always been there. I mean, Paulina.
So actually, I did both. The start of our development was all remote, and then we got an office, and now we're remote again, obviously.
Yeah.
So actually, what we really loved having an office. We had our offices are in the city along a lake in the river in Melbourne, and not a lake, but we got to see each other, and we got to have lunch together, and we got to play the game together, and that was really socially really fun. We there was just we'd have bean bags, and there's a library. There's just so many I guess quality of life things. Oh, obviously the coffee machine at work is free and unlimited, so
good vibes. Yeah. I hadn't thought about testing a multiplayer game when you're remote would be tricky if it's a local multiplayer.
particularly as like we're a part of like Acme X, so we have all these like social events where we'd get to hang out with the other creatives in Melbourne and stuff like that all the time, and now it's just like nope.
Yeah, I think like Wellington sounds similar for you, Jared. Like there's a real dev community there and stuff that you're probably missing out on, at least like in lockdown, not just the remote side of things.
Yeah, I mean, being working at home, that was one of the things in terms of wanting to make sure I did something social. Is I would go to the meetups every month, so I had like people to talk to and interact with. So it wasn't just my small team, and then just sitting by myself most of the time. But yeah, I mean, being in an office, you definitely have way more collaboration and like that kind of community in a place. It's very different for me, at least going into that now.
Yeah, and like, what about testing the co-op for Trigger Witch? Was that something where you had to like pull in your fiance or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, she didn't really want to play much. It was mostly I would get Butler to come around,
right?
Because even though we're working remotely, most of the time we weren't like locked down, so he would come and we would just be doing that if we had to. But yeah, it definitely makes it hard if you don't have people just around.
Sure. So we had a question on Twitter from @mdump. He said, how highly do you recommend investing in your at-home workspace? And if you've done that, like how much difference did it make to your productivity and your well-being?
Highly, super highly. I moved house. That's how much I invested.
Wow.
I got a bigger house that has a third room so that we could achieve work-life balance. And so there's an office now, and it has like my stand desk, like electronic standing desk with my dual monitors and like my high-tech rig and everything. And it's just like, it's really important to optimize those technology things because you're already personally having it hard, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. What about you, Jess? Like you've got a lot of experience working from home, so you must be like the pro as far as the ergonomics and the dual monitors and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the wonderful things about IKEA is that no matter where in the world you live, you know what you're getting, right? So I have like my IKEA desk that I've had in like 3 different locations, 3 different cities that I've lived in. I know exactly how to set it up and how to raise my monitor. I guess for me, I got really into plants. I know a lot of people had like pandemic hobbies. But because we're in the Netherlands, we're like the epicenter of the plant trade here. And so you can get lots of different kinds of plants for really distressingly cheap prices. So it's very easy to like buy them and kill them and get new ones, which I feel kind of guilty about, only a little, but it makes it so much nicer. It just like makes the air nicer, especially for the winter, like the long gray terrible winters that we have here in the Netherlands. Having some green and life around you is almost a substitute for people, kind of.
Yeah, definitely air purifiers as well if you haven't got an enormous plant collection, I guess, too.
I would open the ranch slider sometimes, try to let some fresh air in,
Yeah, I mean, that's where it also comes down to like working in your home. It means that you're living in your workspace as well. So how do you guys find that balance, and how do you figure out the right way to take care of yourself in that aspect?
I think I'd be the same as Paulina in terms of I had a separate room for my office, and I would pretty much never be in there if I wasn't working. Like if I wanted to play something on my computer, that'd be like the only other time, but I would generally just get out of that room, not go in there unless I was working, which is probably the best way to do it. It is kind of hard to unless you set those rules to yourself, like trying to start at a certain time, stop at a certain time, and just like stop being in the space that you were for working. It's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah, sure. Is there anything that like whether you've got a lot of experience in the office or not, that you just know that you're missing by having that distance between you and your colleagues? Like what would you think would be the thing that's the biggest challenge of not being together? And how do you overcome that, I guess?
Is that for me or just anyone?
Oh, just anyone. Like, yeah.
There you go, Jess, go for it.
All right. Yeah, I think that the hardest part of not being in the same space as the colleagues is actually the time difference, right? And we've had people on our team who have moved throughout the project, but there's about 2 hours of overlap between the team in Australia and the team in my time zone here. And the only way that we get overlap with people in North America and Europe and South Africa is if the North Americans get up super early. And of course, that's tough when you have kids and things like this. Got to take them to school now. So we're running into like the back to school time switches. And then soon it'll be like the times are changing for daylight savings or, yeah. And so trying to coordinate really complicated projects where the leadership is distributed from the people who are doing the work it requires really super extra rigorous production, right? You have to organize everyone's preferred modes of communication and make sure everybody knows who precisely needs to know what. Otherwise you would get like just inundated, overwhelmed with messages. And distinguishing between official comms and casual comms. Like if you write something in Slack, it doesn't exist unless it gets put on a Jira ticket. You just have to assume that anything that happens in Slack is just going to melt away into the ether. And if you want it to be actioned, you got to stick it on a ticket. Little things like this just to help keep the coordination running. Yeah.
For me, it's like, sorry, you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna ask you, so go ahead.
Invite me. For me, it's just like it's that connection layer. Like when we're all in the office, I can look at someone and instantly know how they're feeling. And it's hard to be supportive for my team when I'm not there. So you either need to like have a lot of one-on-ones, or you need to get really good. And I guess I get to do this is when we have meetings. Sometimes you focus on the thing that you're presenting. Sometimes I just like actually turn the presentation off and I watch how people are, because like that's the only way you can calibrate of like, oh, my program is looking overwhelmed. I need to talk to them about, is there a workflow issue to optimize or a communication problem? Like, it's like, how do you maintain someone's well-being when it's very difficult in a bigger team? Not that I have a bigger team, but like, more than 2 people in a team to check in. Yeah,
that was one of the questions that I was going to get to. So I'm glad that you both kind of touched on that. So Jess, as a producer, part of your role, I think you described it previously as like wrangling cats, or I said herding sheep, but the cats works too. You've got to get a lot of people lined up, and it might be the same with you, Paulina. You've got to organize a lot of people's work output and manage, your own work, but be figuring out if people are on track and if people are behind, how to get people caught up. So you're having to just know a lot about what everyone's doing, but when you can't just visually see it or have casual conversations with people, they might not want to naturally bring up that they're behind, or you might not be able to tell. So how do you keep up with everyone and overcome that side of it?
Yeah, I think one of the key parts of being a producer is you have to establish yourself as someone who people feel comfortable bringing bad news to. So, if you give someone the wrong facial expression or the wrong tone of voice once when they say that they're going to be late on a deadline, that can mess up your relationship with them for like months. It can take months to recover that. They'll be hesitant to give estimates, and they won't be able to give accurate estimates because they're nervous about it, and they'll overwork and do other things. They're just like not healthy, right? So just being someone who's like, you have everything that you need is something that I am willing to give you. Let's just find a way to make it work, right? Like no matter how long it takes. The estimates are just to help us so that we can plan things, Just having a very positive, supportive attitude towards organization and deliverables, rather than a harder, like we have deadlines and we have to meet them. That's how you talk when you're talking to your publisher, right? But when you're talking to the people who are doing the work, it's a very different, much more grounded human approach.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Is it similar with you, Paulina? Like you've got experience working with these people in person, so you might know some of their personalities really well. Is there anything you can do to to like just know how people are, or do you have to like make this like what you said before, like a really deliberate effort to check in with people?
I have kind of 3 tips for this. I'm actually not the producer, so I'm more like about, like, I guess I'm not managing the day to day, but I do care a lot about if people are like not feeling well. So 3 things that we do is every day when we do stand up, we have a section at the end. The third question that we ask is, do you have any concerns? And so people will say, oh, I'm not feeling well, or I'm behind on this, or whatever. And creating that culture where it's safe to be honest and talk about your actual concerns, whether it's mental health or work related, is my number 1 tip. And that takes months to do. I guess that I agree with the other thing Jessica said of like being flexible. Like if people aren't feeling well or whatever, and they tell you, I'm just happy you told me. Like I want you to go and do whatever you need to do to get better. Do that, and then let me know when you're feeling better. That's it. And the third thing that we do that actually has been a real source of joy for me is we've been doing a lot of social games. So we'll play Smash, or actually every week we'll play a different staff will choose a game that they want to play with the rest of the team. And so we have this coordinated hangout time, like 4:30, and we just play a game together and we be human together. And that helps a lot.
That's cool.
Yeah, we probably have quite a few similar things to that, actually, working at Pickpock, because I mean, we have been in the office and then we stopped being in the office, and seeing the difference between that is quite interesting, and the ways people have to change how they interact because you're having to do it either over calls or text only. Because I just went back into the first time after lockdown into the office today, and it's just so much easier being able to just grab someone for a second or something to do a small thing. But then when you have to, I realize, like, working remotely, that not many people want to put up to, oh, we'll do like a one-on-one call just to figure out this problem, where normally it would take like 20 seconds if you were in person. It's just like so much easier to do that, I guess. But we do a couple similar things, like twice a day whilst we're in lockdown, we were doing a crossword thing together as a team. Like you could do something together, so you're like still socializing in some ways, otherwise you're just still quite isolated. So having some of that so you can still be together in some ways is quite good.
Yeah, the fact that you can do that like in work hours is a really cool thing.
Yeah, it's like built into it. Yeah,
because I know, like, in my job, which isn't in the games industry, sometimes it's like, oh, who wants to do like Friday night drinks or something, and I'm thinking like, I like you guys, but when work's over, I don't want to have any chance of continuing to talk about work. I just want to like play games and stuff. So that's perfect for you guys. That's really cool.
Another thing that's just quickly is we also had like because our studio's in Discord. We have a channel called Ambient Office, where so if people like want to just hang out while they do whatever it is they're doing, they can just jump in that channel, and someone else might jump in too, and so they can just have that like simulated almost like feeling of like being in an office in the same next to each other without being there. Yeah,
that's great.
We actually did that for a lot of our development of Reverie. Is we all kind of just were on Discord the whole day essentially. You could be on mute or whatever, but you were always there to just like, if someone wanted to pipe up and say a small thing, they could. But we didn't do that as much for Trigger Witch, and I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's definitely nice if someone has the option, possibly, like to have a channel like that is kind of cool.
Yeah, Jess, I remember like when we were talking the other day, you mentioned having like different channels in your, I can't remember if it was Slack or Discord, but for different topics, so that you could have interactions through the day, whether it was talking about movies or games or the footy or whatever. And then I guess you've got all your professional ones there. So I guess there's something like that, foster that sense of talking about things that aren't just work.
Yeah, definitely. It can be hard because they're all in the same space. So like I'm looking at the fun stuff at the same time as I'm looking at stressful messages or important decisions. And also like we have channels that we share with our publisher as well. So I actually like taking it out of Slack and opening up a Google room. We use Google workspaces for our email and calendars and Drive and all of that stuff. So yeah, having video calls over there and just like this different space feels different for some reason. But it's like hard. It's almost like stepping into a different room right? You're like you're just walking to the water cooler, you're just going to go hang out there for a minute. Yeah, that helps a lot.
That's cool. Yeah,
I feel like I get that, because I mean, you get if you get like the notification of your sound of your thing, which is your work thing, you're like, oh, that's that notification. But we actually end up using at PECPOD, we use the Google chat stuff as our main thing, and we do have the separate channels as well. But yeah, I think it is kind of hard sometimes when you see all your notifications, you're like figuring out which ones are important and which ones aren't if it's all in the same place, which is interesting.
Yeah. That's a good time to ask, I think, like maybe you can recommend some tools that you've found that are really useful for whether it's workflow, for social things. Like what are the apps or programs or any kinds of recommendations you'd have for people about how they can make this experience more efficient or just more fun?
I can go if you want.
Yeah, go. What do you got?
At Rainbite, my favorite one that we used it was very minimal because there's only 3 of us, but we used Basecamp, which I don't think that many people use. I don't know if it's super popular or not. But I just like the list thing of that was quite easy. And because there's only 3 of us, we essentially just had our own lists. We didn't do much of the like assigning of stuff. And now working at PECPOD, we have a team of, I think my team's like 10 or so people, having Jira, which is like a lot more in depth, but also a lot more like, you can do a lot more with it and a lot more organization. And I'm not on the organization side, but having people that do that stuff and help like get your sprints all sorted and you have like your bugs and like priorities and stuff is very useful. And I would say most people would probably recommend Jira is pretty good. But
how do you spell that one?
Jira.
Yep. Paulina, is there anything that you've found has just made a huge difference to workflow? It doesn't have to be like in the last year or so. It could just be in general, I guess, for your remote work.
I think like Jess and Jared, we also use Jira. Also use Confluence for our documentation, which actually happens to also like be the same brand as Jira, but a different sub-product. I don't know, there's other things too, like we use like Easy, I can't remember if it's Easy Retro, I think that might be the name of it, as like an online agile retro tool so that you can have like images and a more visualized retro if you do your processes that way. Yeah.
Cool. Jess, I have this vision or this picture in my head that producers are like the queens or kings of lists. So you must have just like schedules and lists like that could be getting out of hand if you aren't organized. So how do you keep those things concise?
Yeah, I think having everything in its place helps a lot. So how you organize your files, your naming conventions, where you store things is super important. One thing that I've found that really helps is I use a program called Workona for my tab organization on Chrome. And you can basically create like a working browser for each of your areas of life, like for your job, for your volunteer, for your taxes, all in their own separate thing, right? And so at the end of the day, I can just like click the close button and everything work related disappears, and I can just pull up all my personal life things. That way I can sort of like use the same computer for like organizing all these different parts of life that require maintenance. So that helps a lot. And the second one that I would really recommend is, again, with the Google Rooms, because I really like them. One nice thing about them is that you can set up an external room. So and you can create documents and task lists in the external room. And that means that you can have people who are not from your company, who don't have a company email. You can come in and have access to whatever documents create in that room. So you don't have to like go off and set up like separate permissions, and you can assign tasks to them with like their name and the due date in that room. And so it becomes like a little source of truth for that working relationship. So for things that are sort of like extraneous to internal comms, which are handled through the usual programs, that is so helpful, like meeting with the publisher. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Hopefully people can, if they didn't know about those tools, figure out how to use them or access them, because they all sound really, really helpful. We haven't really talked about like the nuts and bolts of actually game development in the creative sense. So I'm interested, probably more Paulina and Jared for this kind of question, but what impact does the isolated work have on your creativity and your ability to sit down and actually, like make the game in that sense?
I don't want to always go first. You can go first if you want.
You go first.
Ladies
all
first.
Right. Sure. Yeah, it's really hard. I guess it depends, a lot on like whether you're extrovert or introvert as well. But for me, like I really love having my weekly playtest where I like play with the team, and obviously that can't happen in real life. So I guess creating like a list of the things that give you the most joy creatively and making sure that you do them regularly is really important. So for me, like it's chatting with the art team and the VFX team and talking about the direction of what cool effects we're making, what magic we're making. Or it might be like blocking out a couple of hours to do some writing on the narrative design or something like that. Like just, I guess you have to make time for these things or you will get creatively drained. And, oddly, like sometimes I find because it's work from home and because it's a pandemic, it's sometimes not work stuff that I do to creatively recharge. Yeah.
Jared, how about yourself? I guess for you, there's a lot of like being a programmer. It's like a lot of problem solving in your creativity as well.
Yeah, well, because I mean, the question was kind of like, it was, how do you creatively do your stuff? Is what you're saying? Like, how do you do your?
Like, when you're on your own and isolated, what impact does that have on your ability to be creative and not get stuck in some kind of rut, I guess?
I do think the main thing I would do with Rainbite stuff is, because we would just mainly use Discord, is to try and make to like keep it so that you had feedback. I guess I'd always try and send things I'm doing work in progress to people so they could respond to it, and you'd be able to like get that feedback. Because if you try and make something in isolation and you complete it too far, and then someone's like, oh, you should have done this thing, you're like, yeah, well, it's kind of too late now, something, And there's the difference of being in an office, is you do have the people around that can a lot quickly do that, but you have to like proactively yourself send that stuff out to people to be like, come look at this thing, because people can't just look at your computer screen as you're like sitting there. And that's what I would do quite often in the middle of stuff, or I'd even send it to you sometimes, then you'd tell me to change something.
Sure. And I guess for you, Jess, like as the producer and someone that's part of your job is to organize the people who are doing the things that these guys have just talked about. How do you help someone who's maybe in a creative rut or not able to solve a problem in their workload?
Yeah, I think I work really closely with the art team. And one thing that works for us in that field is just having daily reviews where we pop up what we worked on, and then they can like look at it and they can like draw on the board and like on the program and make comments on what they would do differently. And because they're all professional artists, this is like a wonderful experience, not like the terrifying experience that it would be if I was putting something I made up on a board. But they are all like inspired by each other in this way. And I think another thing that really helps is just having like a guideline of how much you're willing to work on a thing before you check in with the other people whose work is implicated in it. And so in the art team, that's 80%, work on something till it's 80% finished, then get a review, and then figure out whether you want to like finish at that last 20% or like step back a little bit. So depending on the field that you're in, that'll be a different number, but just having like sort of a guideline, right? About when is a good time to check in, then you feel a lot better just putting aside a task for now, even if it's important, because it'll save time down in the long run. No one wants to spend time doing work that gets cut, right? That's no fun. So
yeah, no, that 80-20 idea is really interesting. I think I can definitely see how that could save a lot of time if people do get someone to check over their work before it's finished.
I just had one last note on that, actually.
Yeah.
Something that we've been doing is sprint presentations. So every sprint, we'll have like a little review hour where everyone makes a little presentation of the stuff they made. And we've just been finding that people really find that a source of joy of like, the programmers will be like, oh, I made this sound effect work and interact with this baby wombat or whatever is going on. And I guess getting to like, share that energy and like clap when you think it's cool and stuff like that is really fun to vibe with the team and help with motivation for creativity.
Very cool. Yeah. So, part of this panel, even in the title, it's like how to do this without losing your mind. So that's probably what we'll focus on here for a second, is the mental health side. And you've touched on that already about, some of the things you can do, but I'm wondering, how do you care for mental health when it comes to not only yourself, but you might, depending on your role, have a responsibility to be caring for several other people in your team as well to some degree. So yeah, tell me how you go through that, maybe what your key tips are if you've got any. We might start with Jared.
Sure. Yeah, in terms of things I would do, I mean, one big thing we did for Triggerwitch was we did 4-day work weeks. So having a 3-day weekend was nice. But yeah, I think one of the big things that I said before is like having those strict hours for working, which included the 4-day work week, because I just did not work on the weekend at all. I didn't touch anything. I didn't respond to any emails. But even getting up in the morning and like when it's 5 o'clock, I would stop. There is some situations where you get an email from a publisher because they're in a different country and you got to do something maybe, but just trying to like not do your main set of work when you can. And if the email can wait, make it wait for the next day kind of thing, and just try and separate your work life is probably the biggest thing. Naps are great too. Do the naps.
And what about like your work? You've got a situation that probably a lot of indies starting out might be in, where they're working with a couple of their friends, like it's a very small team. So was there ever any times that you had to notice like, oh, those guys are doing it tough? Or it might have been the opposite, where like I know, especially towards launch, like you were the one doing all the patches, so it seems like you were doing all this work and everyone was maybe having to check in on you.
Yeah, we definitely we've had times where it's like making sure like it has someone got something happening in their life that's causing them to not work as well, or like what is going wrong, or is someone having to work more, and like why are they having to work more, like can we stop that? Can we spread the work out? With only 3 of us, sometimes like when I did the patches, I was the only one who had dev kits. I was the only one that could do it, and the release date was set, and I was kind of like, I'm gonna have to work more than I normally do. But I did work 4-day work weeks like the last year or so, so I was like, it's only a couple
making
weeks
up for it.
Crunch is never good, but it's self-imposed, I guess, and that's not better.
Sure. Paulina, how about you? Like as a creative director, I feel like you'd have a lot of people that probably look to you as an example of how to operate and setting a pace and like that kind of thing, as far as like a work ethic. So how does mental health factor into that, and making sure that everyone's taking care of themselves?
That's a big question.
We've got time.
Definitely what Jared said, like you actually really need to be really like rigid about those hard work-life balances. Like no talking about work outside of the office room. Like no email notifications on your phone. Like you just don't want to be like contaminate your spaces. And I think that's the frame that you really need to use of, I want to protect my home as my home, and then my other room is my like workplace. Otherwise, like you just become a work bot and you'll only think about work all day long. So I think that's really important. Definitely something that we do is we talk a lot about mental health at work. So we used to have this thing where actually before stand up, if anyone wanted to chat about mental health or how they are or whatever, you just jump in the channel before stand up, and then we'd have a chat, which is really fun. But also just like seeing a psych, being really open about that and where you are every day, particularly in stand up. If I'm like, I got 6 hours sleep today, I'm gonna have to duck out and nap. Then I guess as a leader, you have to really be willing to be vulnerable, or you'll create this fake presentation that it's all work and there's no humanness.
Yeah.
Which isn't sustainable. So for me, definitely being really open and honest about how I am. Even if it's like not something I would normally do, I will do it in this instance because it will encourage open discussion. Yeah.
And being in Melbourne, like I guess I'm in Geelong, so we're following quite closely how things are going for you guys. But it's been a really rough 18 months. Like I can imagine even people with no, history of anxiety or depression or any kind of mental health issues have, like, everyone's no one's been doing like perfectly fine when we're not at our best. So how have you actively been able to it might not be your responsibility as a creative director to make sure that everyone's okay, but are there any things that you've done to step in when people haven't been well and to actively support them?
Yeah, most definitely. I guess I have like a mental checklist of how I think things are going. And if I'm watching someone's mental health go down, there'll be a point where I'll intervene and I'll be like, have a one-on-one, and I'll be like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Can you? And I'll check with our producer and I'll be like, how are we going? Is it okay if this person like takes a few days off? And I'll try and organize for them to take some time off. Because I think that is the first thing, right? We got to acknowledge that there's that this is suboptimal, that this is not how we wanted to do this. And actually your health is really more important than the project. So please just take a few days off. That's the kind of things I've done. But other things too, like I guess let staff know that there are a bunch of resources for game devs in Australia to like have their own creative lifeline or counseling channel to talk about these issues. To like have little processes, like every day when we do stand up, we end it by doing stretches and to talk about like how our bodies are feeling and stuff. So like, and you're right. It sucks. It's like really tough. Yeah. I hope that answered the question.
No, it does. It does. And I think that I guess it's hard to call it a positive, but I think that we've all got a shared experience at the moment in this aspect. Like we're all going through the same experience to different, like handling it to different degrees and different levels based on like the anxieties that you may have had prior to a situation like we're in now. But I think it's easy. I think it's made it a lot easier for people to understand what it could be like to live with those struggles, because it's I think the pandemic has introduced the concept of anxiety to a lot of people who didn't have that experience before. Jess, for you, is there similar things, like as far as like managing people, and I guess for your own self as well? Like you've worked remotely for a long time in multiple roles prior to Drop Bear. So yeah, what's some of your tips that you've got for yourself, but also for helping others in your team?
Yeah, I think one thing that I sort of learned the hard way personally is that when you are feeling overwhelmed and when you're like not doing okay for whatever reason, whether it pertains to work or personal life or whatever, your first and only priority has to be taking care of your well-being. Like it's so easy when you're overwhelmed to think of all the things that you have to do, right? And to get stuck into the cycle of, well, if I do these things, then I'll feel better. And solving your feelings by completing tasks is a trick. It seems like a good idea, right? It seems like a good idea at the time, but it can lead to this sort of vicious cycle of perfectionism and overwork where you're like constantly trying to solve your feelings by doing more work. I know that's not everybody's issue, but personally, I found that has really made a difference in my life. Just taking a break to like walk in the garden and pet a cat and like check in with my feelings before deciding how I'm going to solve them by like completing tasks. Separating those two parts of the process of having an emotional experience has made a really big difference. And this is something that I tell to people on my team as well. Like a lot of companies will say, put yourself first, but then don't end up having policies that support that. So having things like paid time off, having a policy where like your personal well-being comes first. If you message me and say you're not coming in today because you have to take care of some things, no problem. Like actually reacting to that in a way, like as someone who's accountable for their schedules in a way that is positive, right? It's part of my responsibility to make them feel like that they actually are enabled to do that instead of having the stress response of like, oh shit, how are we going to get everything done? Yeah, so centering that is part of, I think, like this mental health literacy. And in a professional context, really, that's I think my responsibility is like letting people know, like, hey, it seems like you're acting like X. Have you heard of Y? Maybe you could read some about it. Here are some articles. Let me know if you need help accessing further resources, as opposed to trying to be their therapist, which can be inappropriate and unhelpful in a lot of ways. It's part of the separating the work and the home spheres, as well as just like you need people to learn how to be self-reliant, and self-reliance sometimes just means getting the right professional to help you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And it's made me think of this concept of like the way that we communicate with our teams. There's so many different ways. It could be a phone call, could be an email, could be an instant message. Like, are there certain conversations that call for a certain model of communication, and how do you decide which is the right format to approach a serious issue? Because I know that whether it's you have to discipline someone for work that's not getting done, or for work that's not up to a certain standard, or it could just be checking in with someone and wanting to make sure that that what you're about to talk to them about as far as their work isn't going to send them into some kind of spiral.
Yeah, I think that everyone has their own preferred communication style, and part of being a producer is knowing what that is for your team or in any kind of team leadership position. And so just knowing what works best for people. Some people work best with an audio call, some people work best with a video call, some people you get their best answers when you just shoot them as a quick Slack message, right? And that's when they'll just give you what you need and not get distracted by other things. So yeah, it's extremely personal. There are things, and I guess like the other part of that is that I personally have things that I need to have face-to-face contacts with when talking about in order to feel good myself, right? And so knowing what those are for me and prioritizing that as well, like communicating that to my team, like, hey, we can keep this meeting really short, but I would like 7 minutes, just 7 minutes of FaceTime. If you can just like put that in for me at some point today, right? Yeah, that helps a lot.
Oh. So it may have been something you've brought up already, but can you think of ways or good ways that your teams have made people feel welcome and integrated into the team culture when you can't spend time together? Because I know, Jared, you've joined PicPoc in the last kind of 6 months, and Jess, you've joined Drop Bear also in recent months. And so joining a new team when you can't necessarily spend as much time together as you'd like to, or whether it's because of remote, like distance reasons, or because of pandemic reasons, what's something that's made you feel welcome, or what's something for you, Paulina, that you'd like to do to make people feel part of that team when you can't break bread and have a meal together?
Who's gonna start?
You go, Paulina.
Oh, okay. So for me, I do like those one-on-one conversations, and I agree with Jess, like they don't have to go on forever. Definitely like priming people to that first. But I'm getting sidetracked. The question was about welcoming. So onboarding, like face-to-face conversations, just like, I guess, getting to know the people. We have like a games channel and a chit chat channel where we're encouraged to like socialize if people want to. But also just that thing I said earlier about playing games together. Like we're all here in the games industry for a reason. It's because we love games. So playing a game, even playing our own game, but in an unstructured, fun way that's not about critique, but is just about the social experience, I think is a really good way of creating that space for them to feel welcome and that their personality has space to be. Yeah,
cool. Jared, what was it that made you feel welcome at PicPoc?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm cheating a little bit because I did start in the office there. I didn't actually have to be remote, but we did do it. They did do a bunch of things, and like it was, for me, it was interesting. I joined a team where they had just released a PC version of their game, and I was joining like post. People were like kind of leaving, and like it was a kind of I guess it's a weird point to join a team, but we did do a bunch of stuff, and they do stuff throughout. Like still, I mean, assuming we didn't have lockdowns, but we do like monthly lunches as a team, and we went and did like an escape room and stuff. And this is cheating, obviously, because these are physical things that we were actually able to do.
Well, what have you been doing since the lockdown? Like, because I'm sure there's been new people come in as well in that time.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of the things that we do, I mentioned before, we do like the crossword stuff now at the moment in lockdown. That's just a social thing you can do that you wouldn't do physically. And we have the same thing with channels where you do have like, we have like a fun channel where people post memes and whatever kind of silly stuff. And then you have your more work channels. And I feel like for me, because I was the new person, I kind of did find those intimidating somewhat starting off, like, because everyone's already, for me, they were already like a team of people, and I was kind of joining in, which I guess is like most of the teams. But you're joining in, and you're trying to feel welcomed, I guess. But I did feel welcome, but I think it did help being able to be in a physical space.
Sure.
And then being in lockdown, I do think it's not something that we ever really did at Rainbow because we're already friends, but being able to do video calls does put like names to faces, and you get like see people, their personality a bit more, I guess. I think it's helpful.
Yeah. And Jess, for you?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I did was I set up just 25-minute calls with everybody on the team, even though I wouldn't really be working with directly. And so that took like about 3 weeks to get through everyone across all the time zones. But just having that initial, like, let's hang out and like not really talk about work, talk about what games we play and, you know, where we live, what our city is like. That's always an easy thing to go to chat about. It just really helps set off the relationship in the right direction. Because normally when you meet your coworkers, you're being introduced by like your main points of contact who maybe interviewed you and was involved in the hiring process, and they walk around with you to people's desks and introduce you to everyone. And in lieu of that activity, having that FaceTime was really important for just getting to know who people were and putting them in a place where they felt like they could reach out to me. Like they did know that I was available and happy to like listen to whatever they have to say. And yeah, I can't imagine what I would have done without that time, because it revealed some really important information about like times people are available and how they like to be contacted and how they don't like to be contacted. And what kinds of things they're like willing to just shoot the shit about, right? Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, we're getting towards the end. So I'm really interested for people watching or listening to this who are entering game development now or soon, or they want to. What should they expect with the, you know, the times that we're in now, and what should they be prepared for as far as, you know, whether it's going into an environment that is remote or one that could be at any, you know, day at the drop of a hat, the way things have been, especially in Australia, things can change so quickly. So yeah, with a lot of studios hiring remote positions that will eventually be in an office, what should they expect for the time being? Who wants to go first?
I guess I could go. You're saying like what should they expect in terms of like how they would work, or like joining into that kind of team, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's just an overall like tip maybe, or advice for people that are jumping into that situation for the first time, whether it's coming from other industries or from studying at university and they're about to be part of that team environment for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I do think one thing, at least from lockdown, working at home or working at Rainbow stuff remotely, is like you have to be pretty good at self-organization and self-control over. I guess you don't feel as much pressure because you're not around people to stop like just scrolling Facebook or whatever. You have to be someone that is like able to do stuff, and like, and I think, yeah, same thing I said before about like limiting when you work and that kind of stuff. It's like it'll be good to have those skills and be aware of that. But I think if you're someone that has gone to university or something, a lot of the times you will have had to work on something where you are like you're dictating your own time and trying to make sure you do all that. So that is probably one thing I would say, and it does help to obviously have a team that you communicate with that will be able to support you in that way. But I feel like, especially with Rainbow stuff, a lot of my stuff I did was quite by myself and being able to be good at controlling how you work by yourself. I guess I'm just used to it. It's like all I've ever done, so I'm just used to it, but I don't know.
Paulina?
Okay, I 100% agree with what Jared said, but I'm going to give a different tip, and that is to really look after yourself properly. Like, and what I mean is exercise regularly, go for walks, take breaks. Don't overstrain your eyes, set up your desk properly. All of these things are things that will give you a sustainable place and way to work, and I guess also reinforce your own like personal boundaries of looking after yourself. Because basically, yeah, if you're not at your happiest, if you're not like feeling empowered to do those things, then that will affect you. So look after yourself first. I agree with what Jess said in summary.
Yeah, very good. And Jess?
Yeah, I guess in that line of thinking, I think my top advice would be to just say when you don't know something. Just like be willing to be vulnerable and get used to being vulnerable in that way. And if it turns out that your workplace responds like aggressively to that kind of thing, probably a toxic workplace. Should probably consider moving on, right? But especially when you're not in person, you can't just pop a quick question to your desk neighbor. You can't look over and see if they're like really engrossed in something or not and know whether you're going to be interrupting them. I think that like just as a general rule, give yourself a certain amount of minutes, which might depend on the field that you're in. Like in programming, it might be 20 minutes. And, a simple thing like working with a spreadsheet, it might be 5. Take some time to try and figure it out for yourself, but limit that time. Like don't spend an entire afternoon trying to figure out something that a quick 5-minute conversation could solve. And then ask. And when you do ask, say, here's what I've tried, here's what I've looked into, but I'm not sure the right way to go. And just having this approach to asking questions that's a little bit more structured and maybe different than you would take in school or in other workplaces where you're working, in person, can just really make the process of asking for help more pleasant for you and for other people, which is ultimately a good thing because it means that, needs get met and they get met early. Yeah.
That is actually a good thing. It's an interesting thing that I've had now working at PickPod, because we know they have like 200 employees, and just compared from my 3 to 200, big difference. And I was the only programmer at Rainbyte, and now having people that have knowledge above you and knowing when to ask people for help, because like especially if you're joining a project, like someone may have knowledge that is just super specific and useful for what you're trying to figure out. And so knowing how long you should wait before you like, if I ask this person, I'm sure they'll just be able to tell me in like 1 minute what the solution is. I shouldn't just be wasting my time, but also at least trying a bit and not just asking every single time you want to do anything. You gotta do what you can.
Very good.
I agree with both of that.
Me too. Cool. Well, we're going to wrap it up now. And the thing we haven't talked about is that all 3 of you are working on, or have recently released, in Jared's case, some amazing games, in my opinion. That look at least really awesome, or look really awesome. So I'll give you a minute, or as long as you want to take, to pimp what you're working on and promote your social media channels if you wish to do so. So we might go in reverse order and start with Jess this time.
Sure. So we recently launched a trailer for our publisher announcing that relationship on the game Broken Roads game. And if you are into like post-apocalypse, narrative-driven, full spectrum of humanity kind of, rather than just like dark and gritty, just like a more true to life, almost like autobiographical, where you get to write your own story approach to a role-playing game, you should check it out.
Absolutely. And Paulina, where can people find the work that you're doing with Dragon Bear Studios and Enchanted, and yourself, if they want to follow you on Twitter or anything else?
Sure. So yeah, we're working on Enchanted, which is like a online cooperative multiplayer game. So enchanted.com, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. yeah, jump and subscribe to our mailing list if you want to hear more or see our videos. If you like, I guess, co-op games and having a really fun time, and even RPG magic, come check out our game.
Very cool. And Jared.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to play, I mean, most people just describe it as like a twin stick Zelda. If you, that's what Trigger Witch is. That's what we just released. There's still some physicals you can buy. Play Asia, you can go there and buy those, or you can just buy it digitally. It's on Switch, PS4, Xbox at the moment. And then, so that's at Rainbite if you can follow us on whatever. And then I work at Pickpocket at the moment, which hopefully next year you'll see some things I've been working on. But yeah, it's mainly it.
Very good. Well, thanks everybody for joining me. Appreciate your time. And thanks to everyone that's been tuning in or listening later on audio feeds. We hope that you've learned a lot. And if you're, a game dev or you've got interest in working in this industry, I really think that we've covered some cool tools that will equip you to get the most out of remote working arrangements. You can catch me at Jono himself on social media. And until we cross paths again, take care and enjoy your PAX experience.